Hello and welcome to the vBrownbag. My name is Eric Wright, and I'm here to chat with you about something a quick presentation that I call Think Enterprise, Act OpenStack. The purpose of my talk today is to sort of take a look at the bigger view. Quite often we talk about OpenStack and its context as a product, as a platform, and its distinct advantages, and there are some. One of the challenges comes is in where do we put it? Enterprise customers are coming on board. Enterprise contributors are coming on board. And I wanted to talk about a few things that I find are important in why we do this. Also, it's the entire joy of me to be able to use a semicolon inside a title for once. So about me, as I said, my name is Eric Wright. I'm a blogger, a cloud pundit, whatever that means. I'm a principal solutions engineer for a company called vMturbo. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is @DiscoPosse, and I blog at discoposse.com. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, I always encourage that as well. Just do a search for Disco Posse. Trust me, it's easy to find. And as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of the vBrownbag crew here, and we're very, very happy with all the work they're doing this week. So OpenStack for Enterprise, while it's not necessarily this really cool enterprise that's on the screen, it's interesting when we talk about OpenStack in general. Open source is not a new concept. OpenStack has been around for now 5.5 years, so it's also not new. Enterprise adoption of new technologies is also not new. So what's interesting is, why do we continue to have this conversation about OpenStack for Enterprise, and why does it feel like it's always new? And that's because for enterprise folks, it is. While there's big companies like eBay and PayPal and Walmart that we've talked about, there's a lot of enterprise organizations that haven't quite taken the leap yet. We take a look at, this is from the super user survey that came out from the OpenStack organization. And the foundation produced this, which was great. It's good feedback, and it talks about the real reasons that drive OpenStack adoption. If we take a look at the number one reason, that's operational efficiency. That's the real reason why we make products and technology. It's cool to make cool technology that does neat things, but ultimately it's got to answer a business problem. Accelerating the organization's ability to innovate, another big driver behind this stuff. Saving money over potential other infrastructure choices. Avoiding vendor lock-in, another one we see a lot. But you take a look, ultimately it's all about efficiency, agility, and enabling business to do business better without thinking much about their infrastructure. So when I think about enterprise, it introduces different issues. Enterprise customers have different ways of thinking about what they consider important. We talk about things like high availability. We talk about resiliency and scalability. Not necessarily web scale. Not every enterprise organization is blasting out horizontally scalable applications that have to suddenly become hundreds of nodes and then spin down to 20 when they don't need it. It's more about traditional legacy workloads and where we can move those into OpenStack platforms. Federation between clouds, it's a very important thing. It's something that we've asked for a long time. If you get into OpenStack, that's great, but what happens if you purchase another organization that's also running OpenStack, or you have other cloud alternatives that you've engaged and maybe you want those to speak to each other? Single sign-on, we've got existing authentication and authorization systems. It's a big missing piece. And of course, upgrades and stability. Any enterprise customer is going to want to know that they've got a smooth or predictable experience when they go between versions of their products. So when you think about this in the OpenStack context, we look at all the different programs or projects or whatever they're called in this particular release, and each of them has their own capability to run high availability. It has, Keystone has the ability to spread out horizontally. Nova, of course, is kind of naturally designed. It's easy to distribute controllers around and run hypervisors all over the place. Neutron has the ability to scale out and be able to provide that resiliency. Oslo, all of the core services ultimately have a method by which you can deploy them and provide resiliency. We think about that, the true resiliency is proven architectures. We see reference architectures now, and this is kind of a validation of a way to deploy OpenStack in your organization that has been proven elsewhere. It's not necessarily that it's the right way to do it or the best way to do it, but it's a way that we know has been proven out, and that's very important. Federation, as we talked about with Keystone and being able to communicate in between clouds. Inter-cloud is a very powerful word when we think about, there's a lot of organizations like Cisco and other network companies that their whole drive is creating inter-cloud capability. So Keystone to Keystone Federation being made as dubbed as stable in Kilo was an important step. All the other identity vendors that have come on board and allowed you to be able to have federation between OpenStack and external platforms. That's very important, and it's a positive step for what I call the enterprise customer. Being able to use single sign-on, using other integration with SSO implementations that are on premises, being able to use SAML integration for other web applications, better Active Directory integration. Like it or not, there's a lot of Microsoft products out there, and Active Directory is a big directory, probably the top directory out in enterprise organizations. Then we get into this problem, upgrades and stability. This is where enterprises get a little bit wary about it, and this is why we've seen a lot of this interesting idea of why would we package OpenStack? I like the idea of being able to build OpenStack from scratch and being able to do all the control within that every single layer, but ultimately as an enterprise customer, I want to know that I can be sure that my next upgrade is going to go smoothly. I want to be able to know that I can call 1-800 something and I can get an answer. I'm going to have backing. I'm going to have a partner, perhaps somebody that I've engaged with already. EMC, VMware. We've got all these options in our traditional vendors that we've worked with up to date. We've got Mirantis and Red Hat and other great Linux and OpenStack specific derivatives. These companies have made their business around supporting OpenStack. This is a very important step. Again, to get those enterprise customers on board, they want to ensure that they've got guarantees, or at least the closest thing to guarantees, and at least partners and backing. Ultimately, it's about better integration as well. Having a standalone OpenStack environment over to the left of your data center, or one silo inside your data center, and you just put different workloads over there, that doesn't really give you the win that OpenStack was meant to do. Being able to add it to existing architectures and embrace the features that are there in VMware vSphere, Hyper-V, being able to get extensions, if you've already got Red Hat, you can use Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization. You can just use KVM, and get a lot of those good features. And as every release comes out, we get more and more, feature sets, capabilities, and better integration. At the keynote, if you didn't see it already, you should watch it because there were some very important announcements. They talked about the OpenStack Vendor Certification Program. In the same way I talked about reference architectures, this was a way that we could take the idea of certifying the way vendors interact. We can call ourselves OpenStack ready. You've identified that you interact cleanly with APIs, you meet a certain set of requirements, so you know that as you engage that partner or that product, it's going to work well. The DevCore initiative is a very important one as well. It's being able to define this key set of features and projects that are going to be sort of packaged and treated almost like a project or a product by itself. This, again, is a very important thing when we talk about creating a predictable experience, creating good sort of regulation around things while maintaining the open source capabilities and the open source features and advantages that OpenStack has to offer. RefStack is also another great way. If you're running OpenStack today, you can use the RefStack process and you can update your information into the reference architectures and tells them how are you using it today, how services are interacting, and ultimately it feeds back into the core to tell people this is how OpenStack is truly being used out in the wild. Because when I say I'm running OpenStack, it may not look like your OpenStack. And then, of course, the classic, I avoided vendor lock-in because I moved to OpenStack. You don't want your data center to look like a NASCAR jacket. You don't want to have stickers all over the place and all these logos and shiny flashing things. Did you really avoid vendor lock-in? Do you really need to avoid vendor lock-in? It's an important question you have to ask yourself. Maybe you've just locked into a new vendor. Maybe you've given a little bit of flexibility while still embracing the vendors you have. Vendor lock-in may exist and it may not exist. It's kind of up to you to make that decision amongst yourselves. But ultimately, I don't think that that should be the #1 driver, because in the end, you're going to go down the road with a vendor, with a partner, and it's ultimately just find the right one or the right set of vendors and partners that can build that relationship well with you. And of course, vendors are a classic example. You may remember back in the 1980s and 90s, especially in the 80s, there was what we called the Big Three. As North American companies, they were North American car companies. They were called the Big Three because they were always the top three. They were the incumbents. They were the folks that we knew were always going to be the ones that were the top three. We had this in computing today, or at least we had it up to today. And then along came someone and said, hey, here's our friends Toyota. Hey guys, can we come out and play? So Toyota came along and played. And they played so well, and they gave us such a good solution that they suddenly kind of shoved everybody else out of the playgrounds. And in fact, Toyota leads what we call the Big Three. They call it the Big Four now because we didn't want to alienate the other three. When we think about the Big Three in your data center, you probably had a data center somewhere that looked like this that you've walked into. Now maybe not quite the old school 1950s button-down type of look that it has here, but mainframes are still out there today. IBM is still doing a continuing business in mainframes, and it's probably rising. Tape, still happening all over the place. We still have all of this traditional old legacy architecture that may stay, but OpenStack is helpful because it can augment that. It can take the data that's in these platforms and then create the ability for you to get better, to add the agility while not necessarily doing a rip and replace of your existing architecture. And then the classic question that comes, people watch and they say, I've read about OpenStack, but I'm not Walmart, I'm not eBay, so is it appropriate for me? Well, as an enterprise customer, you have to think, what would you call enterprise? Your bank? They're an enterprise company. Think about it. Your bank has more developers than your hypervisor vendor. It's time for us to accept that that is a reality. There are more and more developers sitting in enterprise organizations than there were 10, 20 years ago. And as OpenStack becomes more viable for those enterprise organizations to enable those development workforces, it's going to become more important for us as community members to help to support that and grow that ecosystem. So hopefully I've excited some folks on OpenStack as a possibility for enterprise, and make sure you watch all the great videos here from the vBrownbag. Thank you very much.